So I think the Ajahn Jessica, who gave us the talk on needs, already mentioned many things. So I will also run things through a little bit quickly. And let's start, though, with the first wave. The first wave, this is hit Thailand on officially 13th January 2020, right? So it was a 61-year-old Chinese woman who was a resident of Wuhan. And by 12th March, Thailand had set up what we call the Center for COVID-19 Situation Administration, the CSA. So this is a typical reaction, like in many countries, where you try to get the news out to the public of how, the rates, of COVID cases and so on and so forth. And by 26 March, the Thai Prime Minister declared a state of emergency. There was a small spike there. And the first wave sort of began, And Thailand implemented social measures in April. And there's a lot of, media commotion. And what happened in the beginning, the first response basically was a full lockdown, which went over a month. So basically the whole month of April, that was the full lockdown. So everything was frozen, and it hit the economy really badly. Okay, so one thing that I want to point out here is that this is the so-called first wave. But let me just move on to the next slide. And so what you see here are some patterns. So you see like the small red thing on the left, that's where the lockdown happened, the full lockdown. But rates were very, very low, right? For about a year and a half, roughly, and started to pick up later in mid last year. So in a sense, Thailand was able to manage the COVID situation pretty well until mid of last year. And the first picture I showed you is only just the first wave is somewhere right in front. It doesn't even look like a wave, right? And so one of the questions that many commentators were asking is, how was Thailand able to manage, the first initial part so well? And I think to a large extent, okay, so the first part is right there, one that I'm talking about. Let's see, that's that blip, right? That's the lockdown there. But for the whole year, I think there were no reported cases or transmission in Thailand for practically the whole year. So how did Thailand manage to do this? Of course, I think most of you know the story about measures and social distancing and wearing masks and so on and so forth. And interestingly, by the way, Thailand is, when I do my research in Thailand, I always find very interesting facts. And maybe I should share one with you right now. I'll share with you a couple as I talk. Do you know where the first case of COVID outside China is where? Do you know where this was? It's Thailand. Okay, so this is Thailand. We always have these amazing stories. Yeah, that's why we call it Amazing Thailand. Okay, right. Okay, so of course, in the beginning there was this contact tracing performed over 1,000 surveillance and rapid response. But what's the key secret? I mean, many countries did this, right? I think Korea did the same, and many other countries. But what I want to highlight is the health system in Thailand. Okay, so Thailand has, you must have heard the universal health system, which was established around 2001, and it is a result of social workers. Okay, so they have for many years they've been struggling to set this up. So I think what we're seeing here are the fruits of people very much like yourself, grassroots people who have been able to get this institutionalized. But here's the key secret in my mind, is that if you go to the different villages, under this, you'll find what we call, I don't know the Thai name, but they're actually so-called, not doctors, but health service providers. And there are 1.1 million of them. I have it somewhere here. Okay, 1.1 million of them. And they live together in the villages. So you'll find one person who takes care of 20, 30 families. And this person will do what? He will be able to identify a case immediately, right? And then get that information back to the central, to the authorities that come and sanitize the place. So I think this is incredible. Okay, so 1.1 million. And the interesting thing is these people, we call them volunteers, but I think recently, maybe 2-3 years ago, they started even to get a wage. Okay, they are paid for their services as well. So I think it's really a good example where in Thailand, people, just common people like you and me are able to network, and through that network, able to provide great services to the community. So that's the point that I wanted to make here, right? So there is the Informal, what we call village health volunteers, about 1.1 million, right? Okay. Of course, when with the lockdown, many things happened. In April, there were only about 21% continued doing what they do. But of course, you know the story, right? Their sales were reduced, businesses closed, jobs dismissed, suspended, and so on and so forth. It basically killed the tourism industry, which Thailand depends on. I think about 20% roughly of GDP in Thailand depends on tourism, right? I think at that time, 1 year, oh, no, not 1 year, 1 week before the lockdown, I actually visited Phuket, which is a very nice resort place. It was completely empty, right? Completely empty. Now there's a famous, not a famous, but a very interesting study by Viego. I think you may have heard of this organization, which actually did a survey in Bangkok. So, and they did it in a couple of other countries in Indonesia and so forth. So I think it's a short read, very nice. And they surveyed 302 persons, and basically domestic workers, home-based workers, street vendors, waste pickers, motorcycle drivers, and massage therapists, right? Okay, so this is an area which, and here this shows you that massage therapists, most of them are women. So if you're thinking of this problem as from a gender angle, and also domestic workers, right? And so these, now what COVID, for me, what I think COVID did was to expose many things that were hidden before COVID, right? Things that were going around that, people are not talking about, it sort of came out. But, you're able to see all those difficulties, all those threats, but you also see all those opportunities as well. So what I think it's not always a bad thing that we discovered when COVID came in. And let me give you the story. I mean, the story of the massage therapists and the people and home-based workers, for example, who are part of the global supply chain, were just totally earned nothing during April. But domestic workers were not too bad, yeah? Okay. So, and they also included the migrant workers that come to Thailand. And because of the lockdown, they couldn't go back home. Yeah. So they were stuck in Thailand. Yeah. And fine, they normally live together with their employers in the houses. And so they, like almost like a family. And to the extent, I don't know whether I can confirm this, but to the extent that they were becoming more competitive amongst each other as well, right? So for certain, their wages were not going to be depressed, right? Because now the supply of domestic help has, and as you can imagine, because of the lockdown, everyone is going back home, work from home, etc., etc. So they need more people to help in their homes. So this was an interesting phenomenon. Okay, so and if you can go back to the study, but of course the overall picture was, oh my God, right? Reduction in pay, no jobs, and so on and so forth, right? Now, interestingly, the government responded by providing cash payouts, right? Cash relief, like in many other countries. But it was managed a bit funny. I think, let me give you another story. So what happened was the government estimated about 2-3 million people may need this, cash handouts, about 5,000 baht, which works to about $130 US. and they made an app for it, and tried to launch it. What happened? 20 million people applied. Crushed the system. Oh my God, right? So sometimes you wonder, are people doing estimations properly in that department, or they're just picking numbers randomly? But as you know, a lot of the reaction towards COVID is very unscientific, right? Okay, the wearing of masks, does it really help? Quarantine 2 weeks. Where did they get 2 weeks from? Why not 2 months? Yeah, a lot of it was politically driven, right? So maybe this is just another way. Anyway, so the second wave, let me speak about the second wave, and I'll move a little bit faster. Okay, so the second wave, what happened was, that's the yellow part here. It started from a place called Samut Sakon, I think, where there were a lot of migrants from Myanmar, about 1,200 cases. They work in the fisheries part, and they got COVID, right? At the time, I think in Thailand itself, there were only about 1,300 cases, but and in Myanmar, there were about 4 times more per day, right? So it was quite serious in Myanmar. So what does this tell us? It gives us, at the time I remember this quite vividly, a lot of people were like, oh my God, the migrants are bringing in, it gives a very bad perception. People say, we should be afraid of them or something like this. So anyway, the life continues, but that's not the big one, right? So we're still on the yellow one. And then there's a big bump, right? That star there. And let me tell you what that is. That is the alpha variant. And it started where? It started at a nightclub in the what we call Tonglo area, nightlife. So where the rich people go, okay? So again, you have to wonder, they're being very irresponsible, and who is going to suffer all, is the common people. So that's where the beginning of the spike comes in. Okay, so that's roughly the story. Now it was estimated, that GDP will shrink by 6.7%, which is the largest in this Southeast Asia. Okay, a number of things were identified: lower tourist arrival, weaker domestic consumption, no money to spend, etc., and disruption in the supply chain. All this is well known, but what I want to say is they really ignore the needs and the concerns of the informal sector, right? These are just broad statements which any government can say. You just need to pull out a blueprint that your neighbor government is saying, and you can say the same thing, right? So this is a big issue. But anyway, I've already told you about the cash handouts and so on. So let me move on. So of course, again, I'm just go back quickly to the WEGO survey, because they did a follow-up, okay, after when the second wave hit, and basically they found very similar things. But again, they report that home-based workers and massage therapists were really hit, but domestic workers weren't, okay? So, and of course, they highlighted other things like mental health issues and the situation for non-Thai migrant workers. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay, so we're right here in the picture now. This is the current picture. This is from yesterday. We are about 4.59 million confirmed cases. The population of Thailand is about 60 million, right? So you can do the math. So we are behind, in Southeast Asia, we're behind Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines. We're very, very similar to the situation here in Malaysia. So quickly, government responses to summarize were the travel restrictions, as you know, and because tourism was being killed, came to a standstill, they decided in mid last year to have something called a sandbox, right? So try to make bubbles or vaccinate people with COVID-free people to destinations like Phuket, Krabi. I don't think it really worked, but there were different efforts to do this, and so on and so forth. And interesting, medical supply, as usual, they try to regulate prices on masks and hand sanitizers and so on. The lockdown didn't have, so after the first lockdown, what happened was now quasi-lockdown. They looked at different provinces, put them in red zone, or orange zone, yellow zone, and play around with experiment with different things like. But overall, there was a nighttime coffee in most places. So nightlife was completely put to a standstill. Public transportation, they're only around 50%. There was closure of certain businesses and restrictions. I'm just trying to, I'm trying to borrow from you a lot of your imagination to think about how the situation developed and reflect also what happened in your own countries, right? And if you go to the government website, you'll find a nice kind of, they made a nice website. I think the URL is there, and they show how they use their money to help, and to help the economy and so on and so forth. But there were issues, and not everyone was able to access these funds. One of the reasons, major reason is, of course, they were not eligible, right? Okay, migrant workers, for example, and they were also didn't have access to digital services. Thailand is moving to something called Thailand 4.0, where digitization is one of the big topics. So, but not everybody can get on board, right? Okay, and so on. Right, good. So, and then the vaccination issue. This is quite dramatic because they started vaccinating in early 2021, and two things here. Sinovac, I don't know. This was really promoted in the initial stages, and partly because the company, the Thai conglomerate.
5 minutes.
5? Okay. Charion CPE actually helped to develop this vaccine, so it was really promoted. I got 2 shots, right? But I don't know whether they're effective. And then, of course, we have what you call the vaccine geopolitics, when the US said they were going to donate 1.5 and so on. So I just want to show you this graph. This is interesting because if you look at the top, that's the vaccination part, and the bottom is the, so if you look at this second jump, this goes up, the vaccination also goes up, right? But the vaccination is still high, so I wonder what happened here. Doesn't explain the second bump, right? It may explain the coming down of the first one, but what does it do for the second one? I don't know. Okay, so impact on the Thai economy, we all know that. The only thing that I want to mention with this particular slide is that debt really started to climb. Okay, that's the last one on the right. So debt has been always an issue in Thailand, and it's getting worse. Apparently, only about 40% actually save. Okay, many people in Thailand will just get their money and spend it. Effect on employment was, of course, terrible. Okay, so can I have my 5 minutes from here, please? Let me go to informal workers. So I'll jump to the definition of informality. All I would like to say here is that about 60% roughly in Thailand is informal, right? Okay. So when I go to conferences and they talk about Thailand and they talk about this and that, but if they don't mention informal economy, I don't know which Thailand they're talking about, right? Doesn't make any 60% is that. Okay, so we have also, so this debate in Thailand anyway is always between health and economy, right? Health and economy. This is how do we balance these two. So you've already seen the health has done pretty well, okay, not too bad. But the economy part, of course, they have social security protection and so on. This is something I think which Ajahn Jessica has explained. And so what I want to tell you now is how did these social protection play out during COVID? Okay, so this is now from the same data that Ajahn Jessica uses from the labor force survey, Q3, etc. So if you see from 2001 to recent times, this is the ratio of should be the formal over informal, right? Yeah. Okay, so if the formal gets $1 in 2011, the informal gets about half, all right, about 0.66. So, but you see up to 2015, it actually goes up. So the wage difference between, this is the median wage in real terms, between formal and informal actually gets smaller until 2015, but it starts coming down. It's coming, right? So informal sector is now disadvantaged from 2015 onwards, and it's pretty bad 2019, 2021, okay? So that's the picture that you get. Okay, I'll show you another picture. So this is in provincial, so incidence of informality. So from the left is 2019, just before the big lockdown, and then 2020 and 2021. So The darker blue areas shows that there's more higher incidence of informality. I think a better picture was this one. Okay, so if you move from 2019 to 2020, or if you look at the left picture, so those are the provinces where informality increased. But from 20 to 21, it also increases even more, right? So the problem has not been solved. That's what. Okay, this is which provinces experienced a fall in median wages. So the left one shows you the informal wages compared to the right one, which is the formal. So in 2019 to 2020 is more or less the same. Everyone was sort of hit. But if you look at the latest, and this is the interesting one, you find that the informal are hit even worse. So it looks like there's no recovery plan, right? This is the message that I'm trying to say. Because the traditional recovery plan, what happened during the quasi-lockdown and so is that many of the workers in the urban areas went back to the farms, right? So the traditional. So the recovery plan should have some understanding of what happens if they come back, right, to the cities. And I don't think they have anything like that. Okay, so let me talk about migrant workers. So 2 minutes here. So this is now when we talk about migrant workers. I think okay, 1 minute. Thank you. So it's about the mobility, right? And this is from Alisa Hassamo, who was working with migrant workers in the Malaysian border. And during lockdown, nothing was prepared, so people were moving illegally. There are 5 different ports where they move between Thailand and Malaysia. So on the left port, which is the popular one, you find that a lot of them were coming in and out illegally, right? So, of course, movement of construction workers, farmers, traders, and sex workers, right? Sex workers were particularly hit because there was no tourism, should I say. Okay, so they went back home, but they went back home and they continued their livelihood, which is interesting. And again, as from the gender perspective, most of them are single mothers with children. And this was something that we need to think about. A very quick one here. Okay, so you understand the ideas of migrant workers. I'll skip this one quickly. And then street food. I think those who have visited Thailand, street food is most important, right? So one of the things that the government tried to do was to formalize or to get them registered, the street vendors. So if you look at this statistic, you'll find like in 2019, 175 stalls were registered, but in Bangkok, officially. But the estimated market traders is actually 152,000. So not many people bothered, right? Okay. But when lockdown came, what happened? They were not able. So, but one thing that I want to say is that street food involves many, many dimensions, including food security, livelihoods, the way you use the urban space, culture, the environment, and so on and so forth. And this is something, okay, I'm almost done. So perception, this is where I'm coming. That's why I had the first slide now, I know, because it's all about perception. It's about being cool, right? Okay, so this is a typical scenario why people think street food is bad. They think it obstructs people, street pedestrians. They think that most vendors are migrant workers. Yeah, they think that they're less sanitary than restaurant foods and so on. But look at these two pictures. The one on top is a street vendor talking to a customer. It's very natural. But look at the one at the bottom. Who's now blocking the space, right? Is it the street vendor or this funny building? I don't know. Okay, so we need to understand that many of our perceptions are not correct. Okay, so what next? Of course, WEGO has given up so many things, including informal worker funds and so on, training. But I want to say this, and I think Professor Jayati will be happy if I mention this. So are we going to formalize the work or the workers, or are we going to formalize the enterprise? And I think you have a lot to say about this, right? Okay, so I think we need to go. So in a sense, we're really, I think it's a struggle between labor and capital, and so far the perception on labor is not good. That's my opinion, right? I'm not going to go to talk about neoliberalism or because I'm not an expert there, but I just feel that the perception on labor is not so good. So we need to revamp that, okay, before we start the journey. to the end. Thank you.